Get this kid out of my lobby. Now. He's making the place look like a shelter. Victoria Hale didn't even look at him when she said it. She was on her phone, walking past the coat check, heels sharp against marble. She stopped just long enough to wave her hand, a quick flick of the wrist, the way you'd shoo a pigeon off a park bench. The boy was 10 years old, small for his age, oversized jacket, a duct-tape notebook pressed against his chest. He looked up at her and said quietly, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm just waiting for my mom. She works here." Victoria glanced down at him. Of course she does. She turned to the bellhop. "Get him out through the service door, not the front. I don't want guests seeing this." The bellhop swallowed hard. The boy stood up, tucked his notebook under his arm, and walked toward the back without a word. But what nobody in that lobby knew, what no one could have possibly guessed, was that this child was about to do something that would bring a billionaire to his knees. Now I know what you're thinking. How could a kid like that possibly change everything? Well, here's the story. 3 floors above that lobby, behind a locked suite door, an old woman was falling apart. Eleanor Crawford, 82 years old, deaf since birth, and right now, she was furious. Her hands moved fast, sharp, jagged signs cutting through the air like blades. But the woman sitting across from her couldn't follow. Patricia Winslow, certified ASL interpreter, hired specifically for tonight's gala, was lost. "Mrs. Crawford, please, can you slow down? I'm not catching everything." Eleanor didn't slow down. She sped up. Her signs became more personal, more emotional. Old gestures from her childhood, private family signs that no textbook had ever printed. She slammed her palm on the armrest. Her face crumbled, not from anger, from loneliness. 82 years of being surrounded by people, and not one of them could hear her. Patricia stepped into the hallway, flustered, and found Victoria Hale waiting. "I can't follow her. She's not using standard sign language. Half of what she's doing, I've never seen before." Victoria pinched the bridge of her nose. "Figure it out. Her son paid you $12,000 for tonight." But Patricia couldn't figure it out. Nobody could. 5 interpreters in 2 years, all certified, all experienced, all failed. Back in the suite, Eleanor stood up. She grabbed her walker. She didn't want Patricia. She didn't want Victoria. She didn't want any of them. She walked out alone. Wrong hallway, wrong turn, or maybe the right one, because the elevator took her down to the service level. Fluorescent lights, concrete floors, the hum of industrial dryers, and the smell of bleach. And sitting on a stack of folded hotel lemons, reading his duct-tape notebook, was the same boy from the lobby. Eleanor stumbled. The walker caught on a door frame. She pitched forward. The boy jumped up and grabbed her arm, steady, gentle, his small hands firm on her elbow. Their eyes met. Eleanor looked at this child. Her lips trembled. And then, without thinking, her hands moved. A quick, desperate sign, not from any textbook, a personal one. One that meant, "I just want someone to hear me." The boy's eyes went wide. He understood. Slowly, carefully, his small fingers shaped a response. "I'm listening." Eleanor stared at him. For a long, frozen moment, she didn't move. Her hands hung in the air, halfway between a question and a prayer. This child, this small, quiet boy in an oversized jacket, had just answered her in her own language. Not a textbook sign, her sign. The personal, messy, heartbroken kind that no interpreter had ever recognized. She lowered herself onto the stack of linens beside him, slowly. The walker scraped against the concrete floor. The dryers hummed behind them, pushing warm air across their backs. And then she began to sign again. Cautiously at first, testing him. Simple things. Her name, the hotel, the party upstairs that she didn't want to attend. Dante watched every movement. His eyes tracked her fingers, her facial expressions, the tilt of her head. When he understood, he nodded. When he didn't pretend. He opened his notebook, flipped to a hand-drawn page of sign illustrations, and pointed. "This one," he said softly. "Can you show me again?" Eleanor looked at the notebook. The pages were filled with hand-drawn signs, dozens of them, sketched in pencil, labeled in a child's handwriting. Some were standard ASL, others were old regional variants. A few were personal signs he'd learned from someone specific. She touched the page with her fingertip. Then she looked at Dante with an expression that hadn't crossed her face in months. Curiosity. She signed faster now, telling him about the gala, about how her son had hired 5 interpreters in 2 years, and every single one made her feel like a problem to be solved. About Ruth, her old interpreter, her best friend, who used to finish her sentences and laugh at her jokes before she even got to the punchline. "Nobody listens the way Ruth did," Eleanor signed. "They just watch my hands and guess." Dante didn't interrupt. He followed her signs like a boy reading a river, watching the current, not fighting it. When she used a home sign he didn't know, he sketched it quickly in his notebook and asked her what it meant. She taught him. He learned it on the spot. The warm air from the dryers pressed against them. The vibration of the machines hummed through the concrete, a rhythm Eleanor could feel in her bones, even though she'd never heard a sound in her life. Somewhere beyond the wall, a string quartet played for guests who would never know this hallway existed. Then Eleanor told a joke. It was about a cat she'd had as a girl, a stubborn orange cat that used to steal bread off the kitchen counter. The punchline depended on a home sign, a flick of the wrist that meant caught red-handed. No textbook, no formal training, just a gesture her family had invented 60 years ago. Dante watched, processed, then burst out laughing. A real laugh, loud and sudden and completely unguarded. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Not sad ones, the kind that come when something you thought was gone comes back without warning. She reached out and cupped Dante's cheek with her trembling hand. This boy, this stranger's child, sitting on a pile of hotel sheets in a service hallway. He heard her. Neither of them noticed Raymond Brooks standing at the end of the corridor. Raymond, head of hotel security, ex-military, a man who had seen everything twice, stood perfectly still. He watched the billionaire's 82-year-old deaf mother sitting on stacked linens, laughing with a 10-year-old black boy who was signing to her with a duct-taped notebook open on his lap. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He pulled out his phone and called one number, the private line of Elliot Crawford. "Sir, I think you need to come down to the service level, right now." He paused. "No, sir, nothing's wrong. Something's right." "Wait, hold on a second. 5 minutes ago, this kid was treated like trash. Nobody trusted him. And now, he's the only one who can reach her. A 10-year-old kid climbing a pile of hotel sheets." Yeah, if that doesn't hit you in the chest, I don't know what will. Dante Turner didn't learn sign language from a school. He didn't learn it from a tutor or a program or a scholarship. He learned it from a lonely old man who lived one floor below him, Mr. Gerald, 76 years old, deaf since childhood, lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment in South Philadelphia with a television he couldn't hear and a window that faced a brick wall. Dante was 6 the first time he noticed him, standing at the corner store, holding a loaf of bread, trying to tell the cashier something. His hands were moving. The cashier stared blankly. People in line got impatient. Someone muttered, "Just pay and go, man." Mr. Gerald paid and left, head down, bread under his arm. Same walk home he'd made 1,000 times. Dante followed him. Not because anyone told him to, not because he understood what sign language was, but because something in that old man's face, the way his mouth moved with no sound coming out, looked like the loneliest thing he'd ever seen. He knocked on Mr. Gerald's door that afternoon. When it opened, Dante held up a piece of notebook paper, block letters, crooked handwriting. I want to learn your language. Mr. Gerald stared at that paper for a long time. Then he stepped aside and let the boy in. 3 afternoons a week, every week, Mr. Gerald's kitchen table, peanut butter sandwiches and hand signs. The old man would shape a word. Dante would copy it. Wrong at first, then less wrong, then right. Mr. Gerald died the following winter, quietly, alone. The way people who are never heard tend to leave. But Dante didn't stop. Public library computers, YouTube tutorials, donated textbooks with missing pages. He filled that duct tape notebook with every sign he could find, and on the first page, he drew Mr. Gerald's hands mid-sign, not from a photo, from memory. His mother, Yvonne, didn't fully understand it. She worried about him. She wanted him focused on school, on grades, on practical things, but she never once told him to stop. Baby, I don't know why you need all those hand words, but if it makes you feel closer to Mr. Gerald, you keep going. Elliot Crawford came fast. No entourage, no assistant, just a billionaire in a tuxedo, moving through a service corridor like a man who just gotten the phone call of his life. Raymond met him at the corner and nodded toward the end of the hallway. Elliot stopped walking. His mother was sitting on a pile of hotel linens, smiling, her hands moving with a lightness he hadn't seen in years. And across from her, cross-legged, notebook open on his lap, a boy he'd never seen before was signing back. Elliot didn't speak. He watched. Eleanor told a story. Her hands painted it, wide, sweeping gestures mixed with tiny, precise flicks that only someone who'd known her for decades would recognize. Home signs, personal signs, the kind that had defeated every interpreter Elliot had ever hired. And this child was keeping up. Elliot stepped closer. He didn't introduce himself, didn't explain who he was. He just crouched down to the boy's level and said one thing. Can you tell me what she just said? Dante looked at Eleanor. She understood. She repeated the story, signing it directly to him this time. A story about the day Elliot was born, the hospital, the fear, the nurses who wouldn't explain anything to a deaf woman because they didn't know how she held her baby for the first time and counted his fingers with her own. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny signs she invented on the spot. And one specific sign, a home sign she'd created that night, a small, sharp tap of her index finger against her temple. It meant stubborn baby. She'd used it for Elliot his entire life. No interpreter had ever caught it. Most didn't even know it existed. Dante turned to Elliot. She said when you were born, the nurses wouldn't talk to her because she was deaf. So she held you and counted your fingers, all 10. And she made up a sign for you that night. He paused. She calls you stubborn baby. She still does. Elliot's jaw tightened. His eyes went glass. He looked at his mother. Eleanor was nodding, pointing at Dante, then back at Elliot, her expression clear as daylight. See? He gets it. Elliot stood slowly. He opened his mouth, but nothing came. That's when Victoria appeared. Heels first, then perfume, then the voice, clipped, efficient, already irritated. Mr. Crawford, the gala starts in 40 minutes. We can't have... She paused, looked at Dante, gestured vaguely at him the way someone gestures at a stain on a tablecloth. This child running around the event. His mother is staff. He shouldn't even be on this floor. The hallway went quiet. The dryers hummed. Raymond's hand tightened at his side. Elliot looked at Victoria, then at Dante, then at his mother, who was still smiling, the first real smile he'd seen on her face since Ruth left. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This child just did something that 5 certified interpreters couldn't do. Not one of them caught the stubborn baby sign. Not one of them made her laugh. Not one of them made her want to keep talking. He straightened his cuffs. "Find him a seat at the family table." Victoria blinked. "Sir, I don't think that's the family table, Victoria." He said it the same way he probably closed deals. Quiet, final, the kind of voice that doesn't repeat itself. Victoria pressed her lips together, turned on her heel, and walked away without another word. But Dante saw her face as she left. This wasn't over. Victoria didn't go far. She found Raymond in the stairwell 2 minutes later. Her voice was low, controlled, the kind of calm that isn't calm at all. "Find the boy's mother. Explain that this is a private, high-security event. Tell her we appreciate her son's help, but it's not appropriate for an unvetted child to be near Mrs. Crawford. Escort them both out through the service exit." Raymond looked at her, steady, unblinking. Mr. Crawford gave direct instruction. "Mr. Crawford is emotional right now. He's not thinking clearly. That's what I'm here for. Ma'am, with all due respect, he told me to seat the boy at the family table. That's what I'm going to do." Victoria's jaw shifted. She stared at Raymond, a black man in a security uniform telling a white executive no. The silence between them said everything neither of them would. She turned and walked away. But the machinery was already moving. Word spread through the hotel the way it always does. Kitchen staff, housekeeping, bellhops whispered from one ear to the next like a lit fuse. "You hear? Yvonne's kid got invited to sit with the Crawfords. At the gala? That boy? They're gonna eat him alive in there." The kitchen crew, the ones who knew Yvonne, who covered her shifts when Dante was sick, who'd watched her work doubles without complaint for 3 straight years, they didn't say much. But they were listening, and silently, every one of them was rooting for that kid. 3 floors down, in the basement laundry room, Dante found his mother. Yvonne Turner was folding towels. Fast hands, mechanical rhythm, the kind of speed that comes from doing the same thing 10,000 times. Her uniform was wrinkled at the elbows. Her name tag was pinned slightly crooked. "Mama." She turned, saw his face, knew immediately something had happened. Dante told her everything. The old woman, the signs, the billionaire, the family table. Every word tumbled out fast, the way a 10-year-old talks when the world has suddenly gotten very big. Yvonne stopped folding. She set the towel down. She pulled her son close and held him, tight, like she was trying to keep him from floating away into a world she couldn't follow. "Baby, those people aren't like us. You don't owe them anything. You don't have to go in there." Dante pulled back. He reached into his jacket and opened the duct-taped notebook. He flipped to the first page, the one with Mr. Gerald's hands drawn in pencil. The page was soft from years of touching. "Mr. Gerald said everyone deserves to be heard, Mama. She's just like him. She's surrounded by people and nobody can hear her." He looked up. "She deserves to be heard." Yvonne stared at her son. This small, serious boy with his father's eyes and a heart she couldn't explain. She blinked. Something hot ran down her cheek. She wiped it with the back of her hand, fast, the way mothers do when they don't want their children to see them break. She straightened his oversized jacket, smoothed the collar, tugged the sleeves down over his wrists. It was the closest thing she could give him to armor. "Then you go in there, and you make sure they hear her." Dante nodded. He tucked the notebook under his arm, turned toward the elevator, and walked. Behind him, Yvonne pressed both hands flat against the folding table. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she prayed. Her boy was about to walk into a room that was never built for someone like him. The ballroom doors opened, and Dante walked in. Everything hit him at once. The chandelier light, blinding, golden, endless. The clink of champagne glasses, The perfume, thick and sweet, hanging in the air like a fog. Hundreds of people in gowns and tuxedos, laughter that sounded like it cost money. And then, silence. Not a dramatic silence, worse, the kind where conversations don't stop, but voices drop, where eyes slide sideways, where people notice you and pretend they don't. A 10-year-old black boy, oversized jacket, worn sneakers, duct tape notebook under his arm, standing in the doorway of a black tie gala. 3 seconds. That's how long the room held its breath. Then Elliot Crawford crossed the floor. He walked directly to Dante, put a hand on his shoulder, and guided him through the crowd. Not behind him, beside him, the way you walk with someone who belongs. He pulled out a chair at the family table, the chair right next to Eleanor. "Sit here, son." Dante sat. Eleanor saw him and reached for his hand immediately. No hesitation, no formality. She grabbed his fingers the way you grab a lifeline. The guests at the table exchanged glances, tight smiles, raised eyebrows, the polite discomfort of people who don't know what to do with something they've never seen before. Then a man across the table leaned forward. Gray hair, expensive watch, the kind of face that's used to being listened to. He turned to Eleanor and spoke slowly, loudly, overpronouncing every word, the way people do when they think volume solves deafness. "It's lovely to have you here tonight, Mrs. Crawford." Dante leaned toward Eleanor and signed the man's words. Then he added his own editorial, a small, quick sign just between them. "He's talking to you like you're 5. Eleanor smirked. Her eyes lit up. She signed back, fast, sharp, wicked. Dante turned to the table and translated, his voice calm and clear. "She says thank you. She also says she's been deaf for 82 years, not 82 minutes, and she can tell when someone's shouting at her, even though she can't hear it." The table went silent. Then someone laughed. Then someone else. The venture capitalist turned red from his collar to his ears. And just like that, Eleanor Crawford became the most interesting person in the room. Over the next 20 minutes, she told story after story, through Dante, about growing up deaf in 1950s America, when people called her slow because she couldn't speak. About raising Elliot alone, a deaf single mother in a world that assumed she couldn't do anything. About the doctors who told her she shouldn't have children. About proving every one of them wrong. Dante translated it all, not word for word, better than that. He caught the rhythm, the humor, the pauses she left for emphasis. He didn't add anything. He didn't soften anything. He gave her voice exactly the shape she intended. The table grew quiet, not uncomfortable quiet, the good kind. The kind where people stop performing and start listening. Guests from the next table leaned in, then the table after that. A small crowd formed, men and women worth millions, standing in their evening gowns and tuxedos, listening to an 82-year-old deaf woman tell her story through the hands of a 10-year-old boy in a second-hand jacket. Nobody was looking at Dante like he didn't belong anymore. But across the ballroom, standing near the bar with the champagne glass she hadn't touched, Victoria Hale was watching. And the look on her face said one thing clearly. She wasn't done. Elliot Crawford stepped away from the table. He didn't announce it, didn't excuse himself. He just stood, walked to the far end of the bar, and stopped. He held the glass of water he hadn't touched. His eyes stayed on one thing. His mother, across the room, talking with her hands the way she used to before the world wore her down. Raymond appeared beside him, didn't speak, just stood there the way old soldiers do, present, quiet, watching. A full minute passed. 2 years, Elliot said. His voice was low, barely above a whisper. 2 years I've been trying to find someone. 12,000 a night, agencies, specialists, the best in the country. He paused. And a 10-year-old kid on a pile of hotel sheets did what none of them could. Raymond said nothing. He didn't need to. Ruth was the last person who really hurt her, Elliot continued. After she left, My mother stopped wanting to talk. Not because she couldn't, because what's the point of talking when nobody understands? He set the glass down. That boy gave her back her voice in an hour. The gala program moved on. Dinner, toasts, the usual choreography of wealth congratulating itself. And then came the part of the evening everyone expected, Elliot's speech. 25th anniversary of Crawford Capital. A prepared toast, polished, professional, safe. Elliot took the stage. The spotlight hit him. 300 faces turned upward. He unfolded his notes, looked at them, then folded them back up and put them in his pocket. I had a speech, he said, but I'm not going to give it. The room shifted. Chairs creaked. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. I want to talk about my mother, he told them. Not the corporate version, the real one. What it means to watch someone you love be silenced. Not by cruelty, but by impatience. By a world that doesn't want to slow down. By people who look at a deaf woman and see a problem instead of a person. I spent 2 years looking for someone who could reach her. Someone with the right training, the right credentials, the right degree. He stopped, looked directly at Dante. Tonight, a 10-year-old boy walked into this room and did what no one else could. He didn't have a degree. He didn't have a certificate. He didn't have credentials. The room was silent. He had something better. He had the patience to listen. Elliot's voice steadied. Son, would you stand up? Every head turned. Dante stood, slowly. The oversized jacket, the worn sneakers, one lace untied. The duct-tape notebook clutched against his chest with both hands. His eyes wide, his chin level. A 10-year-old boy standing in a room full of the most powerful people in Philadelphia. The applause started at Elliot's table, then the next, until 300 people were on their feet. Dante didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just held that notebook a little tighter. And for the first time in his life, an entire room was looking at him like he mattered. The applause faded. The gala moved on. Guests returned to their champagne and conversations, but Eleanor was done with the crowd. She tugged Dante's sleeve and pointed toward a quiet alcove off the main ballroom. A small space with 2 chairs, a side table, and a window overlooking the city lights. Away from the noise, away from the eyes. They sat together, just the two of them. Eleanor's energy had changed. The sharpness was gone. The performer was gone. What was left was something quieter, softer, the version of a person that only comes out when they feel safe. She signed slowly now, deliberately, like someone opening a box they hadn't touched in a long time. She told Dante about Ruth, not the version Elliot knew, that Ruth had retired and moved away, the real version. Ruth had gotten sick, cancer, fast and merciless. She died on a Tuesday morning in March. Eleanor was holding her hand when it happened. She was the only person who ever learned my signs, Eleanor signed. Not the textbook ones, mine, the ones my mother made up, the ones I made up. She knew them all. Her hand slowed. When Ruth died, my language died with her. Nobody could hear me anymore. She looked at Dante. Until you. Dante didn't respond right away. He sat with it, the way a child does when something is too big for words, but not too big for understanding. He looked down at his notebook, at Mr. Gerald's hands on the first page. He understood loss that outlives a person. He understood silence that isn't empty, but full of everything unsaid. Eleanor reached into her handbag. Her fingers moved slowly, stiff, arthritic, deliberate. She pulled out a small photograph with worn edges, black and white. A young woman, beautiful, bright-eyed, mid-20s, signing to a baby in her arms. Eleanor as a young mother, signing to baby Elliot. She pressed the photograph into Dante's notebook, right next to Mr. Gerald's hands. She smoothed it flat with her palm. Then she signed 5 words. The hands that speak matter. Dante touched the photograph with his fingertip. He nodded. He didn't trust his voice. And 20 feet away, through a glass service door, standing in her wrinkled housekeeper uniform with her name tag pinned crooked, Yvonne Turner watched. She saw her son sitting with this old woman. She saw the photograph change hands. She saw Eleanor cup Dante's cheek the same way she herself did every night before bed. Yvonne put her hand over her mouth. She didn't enter. She couldn't. Some moments aren't yours to join. They're yours to witness. It happened fast. One moment, Eleanor was signing. The next, her hand stopped mid-gesture, frozen in the air like a bird that forgot how to fly. Her eyes went wide, not with emotion, with something else. Something is wrong. She grabbed the edge of the side table. Her knuckles went white. Her body swayed. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. And for Eleanor, that meant nothing different. But the look on her face meant everything. Fear. Dante was on his feet before anyone else noticed. He took her arm, steady, calm, the way someone holds a person when they know that panic makes everything worse. "I'm here," he signed. "I'm right here." The alcove erupted. A waiter saw Eleanor gripping the table and shouted for help. Two guests jumped up. Someone knocked over a champagne glass. The crystal shattered on the marble floor, a sound Eleanor couldn't hear, but Dante flinched at. Within 90 seconds, the ballroom shifted from celebration to crisis. Elliot pushed through the crowd. Hotel staff cleared a path. Paramedics were called. Patricia Winslow, the certified interpreter, was pulled from the bar where she'd been quietly nursing her professional humiliation all evening. "Patricia, we need you. Now. She's showing cardiac symptoms. We need to know what she's feeling." Patricia knelt beside Eleanor. She signed slowly, carefully. Textbook perfect, A.S.L. Eleanor's hands moved, but not in textbook. Her signs were erratic, fragmented, stripped down to the most raw, primal gestures she knew. Home signs, childhood signs, the language underneath the language, the one that surfaces when a person is too scared for grammar. Patricia's face went pale. I can't follow her. She's not using anything I recognize. I'm sorry. I don't know what she's saying." She looked at Elliot, helpless. That's when Victoria stepped forward. She'd been standing 3 feet away, watching, waiting for exactly this moment. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "This is a medical emergency. We need a qualified medical interpreter, not a party trick." She looked directly at Dante. "The child needs to step back, now. He is not trained for this. He is not certified. He has no business being involved in a medical situation." The room held its breath. Elliot stood between his mother and his chief of staff. His face was tight. His hands were shaking. For one terrible, stretched out second, he hesitated. Victoria saw it. She pressed harder. "Elliot, think about liability. Think about your mother's safety. We need a professional." The word hung in the air. Professional. It meant not this boy, not this poor, black, unqualified child with his duct tape notebook and his second-hand jacket. The paramedics waited. Patricia waited. The room waited. And then Dante stepped forward. Nobody asked him to. Nobody gave him permission. He just moved, the way water moves toward the lowest point. Natural, inevitable. He knelt beside Eleanor on the cold marble floor. His worn sneakers squeaked against the stone. He took her trembling hands in his, both of them, small fingers wrapping around her swollen knuckles, and he held them still. He didn't sign. Not yet. He just held her. Eleanor's breathing was ragged, shallow. Her chest rose and fell in uneven jolts, but her Her eyes found Dante's face, and something in them shifted. Recognition, anchor. Her breathing slowed. One beat, then another. Dante released her hands gently. Then he signed, slow, close, just for her. I'm here. Tell me where it hurts. Her hands moved, shaking, broken fragments of home signs, gestures that would look like nonsense to anyone watching, but not to Dante. He turned to the paramedics. His voice was steady, clear, no hesitation. She says her chest is tight, left side. She says it feels like pressure, like something sitting on her. She says this has happened before. She recognizes the feeling. The paramedics leaned in. She says her medication is in her room, second drawer of the nightstand, blue bottle. She takes 2 when it happens. He paused. Eleanor signed again, weaker now, her fingers barely moving. She says she's scared, but she doesn't want her son to be scared. She says don't let Elliot worry. Elliot made a sound. Not a word, just a sound. The kind that comes from a place deeper than language. Raymond was already moving. He radioed the front desk. 2 minutes later, a bellhop was sprinting up the stairs to Eleanor's suite. The paramedics worked. Blood pressure cuff, oxygen monitor, calm, practiced hands doing what they were trained to do. But every question they needed answered, every symptom, every history, every detail came through Dante. A 10-year-old boy kneeling on a marble floor, translating a dying woman's fear into medical data, holding her hands between questions so she wouldn't feel alone. 300 people watched. Not one of them moved. Not one of them spoke. The medication arrived. Raymond pressed the blue bottle into the paramedic's hand. 2 pills. Water. Eleanor swallowed. The minutes stretched. Then, slowly, her breathing evened out. The color returned to her face. Her grip on Dante's hand loosened. Not because she wanted to let go, because she didn't need to hold on so tight anymore. She looked at Dante. Her hands trembled, but she raised them and signed one word, safe. Dante nodded. His eyes were wet, but he didn't cry. Not yet. Elliot Crawford, billionaire, CEO, a man who controlled boardrooms and markets and the fate of thousands, dropped to one knee beside a 10-year-old boy on a hotel ballroom floor. His hand found Dante's shoulder. His voice cracked on the first word and never recovered. You just saved her life. He couldn't say anything else. He pulled Dante into a hug, tight, unguarded, shaking, in front of every person in that room. Not for the cameras, not for the story, because his mother was alive, and this child was the reason. Across the room, Victoria Hale stood perfectly still. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She watched a billionaire hold a housekeeper's son on a marble floor, and for the first time all evening, she had nothing to say. Something behind her eyes shifted. Not redemption, not yet, maybe not ever, but silence, from a woman who always had an answer, was its own kind of confession. Morning came quiet. No chandeliers, no champagne, no marble floors. Just pale light pressing through a window with a cracked frame, falling across a kitchen table scarred with years of use. Dante sat at that table, his duct-taped notebook open in front of him, a pencil in his hand. He was drawing new signs, the ones Eleanor had taught him the night before. Each one sketched carefully, labeled underneath in his small, neat handwriting. Yvonne stood at the ironing board 3 feet away, pressing her uniform for the next shift. The iron hissed against the fabric. Steam rose and disappeared. The apartment smelled like starch and coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Neither of them had talked much since last night. Some things are too big to discuss the morning after. You just sit with them. Then came the knock, 3 firm taps. Yvonne set the iron down. She crossed the small living room, 4 steps, that's all it took, and opened the door. Elliot Crawford stood in the hallway. No suit, no tuxedo, jeans, a plain wool coat. No driver waiting downstairs, no assistant carrying a briefcase. Just a man standing in a walk-up apartment building that smelled like cooking oil and old carpet. Yvonne's hand tightened on the door frame. "Mrs. Turner, my name is Elliot Crawford. I believe you know who I am. May I come in?" She didn't answer right away. She looked at him the way a mother looks at anyone who gets too close to her child, measuring, calculating, deciding whether this man was safe or just another version of the world that had never been kind to them. She stepped aside. Elliot sat at the kitchen table across from Dante. He looked at the notebook, the pencil drawings, the duct tape holding the spine together, Eleanor's photograph tucked between the pages next to Mr. Gerald's hands. "May I?" he asked. Dante pushed the notebook toward him. Elliot turned the pages slowly, every sign hand-drawn, every vocabulary word written out phonetically, French words, Spanish words, ASL diagrams, notes in the margins. "Mr. G says this means patience," and "Eleanor's sign for stubborn baby," added just last night, the ink still dark. Elliot closed the notebook. He set it down gently, the way you set down something that matters. "Dante, I'm going to be honest with you. I've spent 2 years and more money than I should admit trying to find someone who can communicate with my mother. I hired the best agencies in the country, interpreters with master's degrees, specialists who charge more per hour than most people make in a day." He paused. "Not one of them made her laugh. Not one of them caught her home signs. Not one of them made her want to keep talking. You did all 3 in 5 minutes." He turned to Yvonne. "I'm not here out of charity, Mrs. Turner. I'm here because my mother lit up last night in a way I haven't seen since Ruth was alive, and I'd like to make sure that doesn't stop." He laid it out. Simple, direct, no legal jargon, no corporate language, just a man at a kitchen table making an offer. First, a full scholarship for Dante, private school through high school, college after that, full tuition, books, everything, specifically in linguistics and communication studies. Not because Elliot was choosing Dante's path for him, but because Dante had already chosen it himself. Second, a paid position for Dante as Eleanor's personal companion and interpreter, structured around his school schedule, after school, weekends, summers, real pay, not a favor, a job. Third, and this one made Yvonne's hand go still on the table, a new position for her. Not in housekeeping, not folding towels in the basement. A role in Crawford Capital's Community Outreach Division, working with deaf and hard-of-hearing families across the city. The kitchen went quiet. The iron had gone cold on the board. The coffee sat untouched. Yvonne looked at Elliot. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were not. "I need to know one thing. Ask me. Is my son going to be treated like a person in your world or like a novelty? Because I've watched people smile at my boy and pat him on the head and then forget his name by Tuesday. I won't do that to him again." Elliot didn't flinch. He didn't look away. "Mrs. Turner, my mother was treated like a novelty her whole life. People smiled at her, spoke slowly at her, patted her on the hand and moved on. I built my company so that talent is the only thing that counts. Doesn't matter where it comes from. Doesn't matter what it looks like." He looked at Dante. "Your son has more talent in those hands than half the people who work for me. And I don't say that lightly." Yvonne held his gaze. 5 seconds. 10. Reading him the way she'd read every landlord, every boss, every person who'd ever made a promise to her family. Then she nodded. Once. Small, but final. Elliot reached into his coat pocket and set something on the table. A notebook, brand new, leather-bound, dark brown. On the cover, embossed in gold, 2 letters, D.T. "The old one got you here," Elliot said. "This one's for what comes next." Dante picked it up, ran his fingers across the initials, opened it to the first page, blank, clean, waiting. Then he reached for the old notebook. Carefully, gently, he removed Eleanor's photograph and Mr. Gerald's hand-drawn page. He placed them both into the new notebook. First page, side by side, the old world and the new one, together. Yvonne turned toward the window. Her shoulders shook once. She pressed her lips tight. She didn't let the sound out. 3 miles away, in a glass office overlooking the city, Victoria Hale opened her email. A company-wide memo from Elliot Crawford. Subject line, Crawford Accessibility Initiative. A new department, dedicated to communication access for deaf and disabled individuals across Philadelphia. Community programs, school partnerships, interpreter training, and the outreach division would be led, in part, by Yvonne Turner. Victoria read it twice. She closed her laptop. She sat back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. No dramatic apology, no tearful confession, just the quiet discomfort of a woman whose assumptions had been dismantled, not by argument, but by proof, publicly, permanently, in a company-wide memo she couldn't delete. Sometimes, the loudest reckoning is the one that doesn't make a sound. 3 months later. The cracked window frame was gone. So was the cold coffee and the ironing board in the living room. Yvonne and Dante had moved, not far, just a few blocks, into a clean 2-bedroom apartment with windows that closed all the way and a kitchen table that didn't wobble. But some things stayed the same. Every Tuesday and Thursday after school, Dante took the bus across town to Eleanor Crawford's home, a brownstone on a tree-lined street with a blue door and flowers on the porch that Eleanor planted herself every spring. He'd walk in without knocking. She'd be waiting in her favorite chair by the window, the leather notebook open on the side table, 2 glasses of lemonade already poured, and they'd sign. Not for money, not for a job, not because anyone was watching. They signed because that's what people do when they've found someone who hears them. Eleanor told him everything. Stories about her childhood, about Elliot's father who left before Elliot could walk, about Ruth, the real Ruth, not the version anyone else knew, who once drove 4 hours in a snowstorm just to sign happy birthday to Eleanor in person. And Dante listened the way he always did, with his eyes, with his hands, with the kind of attention that most adults have forgotten how to give. Some afternoons, he'd teach her something new, a French word, a Spanish phrase, and she'd laugh at his pronunciation and correct his grammar and sign. An 82-year-old deaf woman teaching a 10-year-old boy that language has no walls, only doors. The leather notebook filled up fast. New signs, new words, new drawings. But the first page never changed. Mr. Gerald's hands on the left, Eleanor's photograph on the right. The 2 people who taught Dante that listening is the beginning of everything. Dante Turner didn't have money. He didn't have connections. He didn't have a degree or a title or a last name that opened doors. What he had was something this world doesn't always know how to value: the ability to make someone feel heard. And that ability didn't come from a classroom. It came from a kitchen table, a patient neighbor, and a boy who decided that no one deserves to be invisible. So here's what I want to ask you. Tomorrow, not next week, not someday, tomorrow, notice someone. Not someone important, not someone powerful, not someone who can do anything for you. Notice someone invisible. The janitor who cleans your office after everyone leaves. The cashier who scans your groceries without looking up because no one's looked at her all day. The kid in the back of the class who never raises his hand, not because he has nothing to say, but because he's learned that nobody's going to listen anyway. Look at them. Actually look. You might be standing in front of the next Dante Turner, and the only thing between who they are and who they could become is someone willing to hear them. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been the person nobody noticed, drop a comment. Tell me your story. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Not tomorrow, today. Hit like, subscribe. I'll keep telling these stories because they matter, because you matter. One more thing. If you're in a position to help, consider supporting ASL education in public schools or donating to organizations that provide communication access for deaf and hard of hearing communities. The link is in the description. A few dollars can give a child the tools to become someone's voice. Every Dante deserves a chance. Most of them just need someone to look. Okay, listen for a second. I told this story for a reason, because there are a lot of kids like Dante. Real talent, real potential, but nobody's paying attention. Nobody's giving them a shot. So if this story made you feel something, don't just scroll past it. Hold on to that feeling and actually do something with it. The loudest voice in the room belonged to the hands that spoke in silence.